students spend the most time around.
Still my favorite.
Students will touch them. They'll be amazed by not just the diversity, but the ability of things to again live in a place where they don't associate as healthy or lively. Beyond the Army Corps of Engineers, we've had various partners through the years. This year, it's primarily King University, our Institute for Urban Ecosystem Studies, and the U.S. Coast Guard, the Coast Guard focusing on oil and how they remediate spills. So it's a more important aspect of living in the estuary. We have refineries that are bringing, as Lisa mentioned, tanks, not just with goods, but with petroleum products.
In your thought process, has this estuary cleaned up any over the last 10, 15, 20 years?
I think we'd have to probably go back 30 years, and the advent of Earth Day coincided with law. So it ultimately comes down to people like you, Mayor, the politicians who are going to pass a law that says you need to keep your water clean. So we know that the water is clean. What we suffer from is, prior to 1970, 100 years of no regulation. So all the pollutants tend to be in the sediments. I'm sure the students will see some places where we dredge, to be really careful. And the material gets contained by safety dredges, I'll call them, for lack of a better word. Some are rock and less polluting, and they can just drag up all the material. So it's kind of a mix. We know that the water itself is relatively clean. Evidence is in the wildlife, in the organisms. They wouldn't be there if they couldn't survive.
Lisa, the comprehensive restoration plan that I mentioned in my opening remarks, can you tell us a little bit about that and what's in store for the Hudson-Raritan estuary?
Sure. We have just finished. We just finished the restoration plan. And I'm going to give you this document. You're the first person that's getting this outside of our agency, hard copy. And if it was 2 days from now, I'd be giving you a lovely book that came back from the printers. I'll put the book in the mail. But you know, it's 2 volumes, and one of the main things about the restoration plan is that it is a comprehensive look at the entire Hudson-Raritan estuary, approximately 25 miles around the Statue of Liberty, and it is the consensus vision for future restoration in this harbor. And looking at not only what the goals are for restoration, what the region has worked really hard and long collaboratively with all of the agencies and the stakeholders to figure out what do we really want to restore, what are the opportunities for that restoration, where should we restore, and how do we get there. Mechanisms for actually constructing and implementing restoration opportunities. And that is, I'm going to get into a lot more detail about that, but we just released it and posted it on our website last week.
And tell our viewers, when was this effort initiated, actually?
Well, it
Years
was,
ago.
yeah. It was actually authorized by Congress in 1999, but I think restoration predates the congressional authorization back in 1988 when the Hudson-Raritan estuary was designated as a national estuary in the National Estuary Program, an estuary of national significance, and basically designated the Harbor Estuary Program, which the Corps is a part of, and also John is working on the community, the advisory committee, the HEPCAC, call it, the Harbor Estuary Program. But it's a conglomeration of federal and state and local government and non-governmental organizations and watershed groups that participate to move forward and work through this. And that Harbor Estuary Program has been identifying restoration opportunities over the years and working really hard, but they prepared this really important document called the Comprehensive Conservation Management Plan in 1996, or 1996, I believe, 1996. And that plan not only set out the actions and the objectives that the region should take for restoration, but it said we need to look at this strategically. We need to look at it holistically, comprehensively. We need a regional strategy. And that's when Congress said, okay, we need to look at this, and they authorized the Corps of Engineers to go in there and do a feasibility study under the Hudson-Raritan Estuary Restoration Program. And we have the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey as our non-federal sponsor. And we've been working all along over the years to try to establish what the region wants and developing that strategy. And so,
This can't be easy coordinating clean water effects. I mean, this can't be an easy process.
Well, it probably goes back to our original question about the educational aspect. We know that we have to get into the community, into the schools, to make sure people take ownership of the watershed. So people need to connect their daily activities to the environment through their communities. And it's an ongoing process. Some of our successes have been in storm drain markings. You might see them around the city.
We do.
Little decals that say, no dumping drains to the river. It plays a huge, seems small, but every time someone doesn't actively put something in the storm drain, like it's their personal receptacle, it keeps something that's going to pollute the river out of the river. Our signage on, in English and in Spanish on the crabs. So while crabs are there, we do know that the crabs themselves are toxic. So people can't safely eat the organisms. They're
They
there.
do.
They do, but the organisms accumulate
So when you boil it, it doesn't kill the
It doesn't
toxins.
kill them, and they live eating the smaller organisms and
Right.
living in the bottom of the
Bottom
estuary,
feeders,
where most of the pollution now resides.
Lisa, how is this going to be funded?
well, the restoration plan outlines all different types of mechanisms to actually fund the restoration. And I want, before, I know we're gonna run out of time here, but I want to show just what kind of things we're talking about from a restoration perspective. We can go here. What's really important is over the years, trying to figure out what was important to restore. And what the region came up with was 11 priorities for restoration. And as John was just talking about, contaminated sediments is a really biggie. We want to be able to remediate and restore the contaminated sediments to stop fish consumption advisories and have habitat that's available, and enhance habitat for not only coastal wetlands and eelgrass beds and oysters and water birds, but getting people down to this harbor. I think from your perspective, the region is, we want to get, one of the major goals is getting the public to be able to access this as a resource, recreate, go boating, fishable, swimmable. That's the goal of EPA. And I think in order to not only setting these goals, but then also targets, quantitative targets, like wetlands, for example. The region came up with pretty steep targets of thousands of acres of wetlands that we want to create. And so that's what makes it really, this is going to be costly to actually achieve those goals. So we've looked at not only existing programs and authorizations, but I think there's a lot of people out there that can fund restoration. And I look to, we look to the states and the federal trustees. There's a lot of potential responsible parties that can utilize natural resource damages to fund this restoration. Or people need projects and permits, and, can use them as implemented for mitigation. So we have to definitely, because this is so costly, we definitely have to band together and establish partnerships to implement the restoration leverage funds.
Lisa and John, I want to thank you for taking the time to be on the show this evening. It's very enlightening, and we need to continue this dialogue because I think education is probably the big way to resolve these issues. So,
Sure.
thank you for taking the time. We'll have to have you back.
Thank you.
If you're in, go ahead.
I just want to say, I want to definitely tell everybody the website.
That's what we do.
Oh, you are?
If
Okay.
you're interested in pulling down the reports or understanding more about this, please go to www.nan.usace.army.mil to download the CRP and learn more about the core activity in the New York, New Jersey harbor. That's www.nan.usace.army.mil for more information about the Army Corps' activity in the New York, New Jersey estuary harbor. For John Dobashevitz and Lisa Barron, I'm Chris Bollwage. We'll see you next week on another edition of Our City. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There we are.